All right, as promised, I have Tasha Heflin here, public defender for the state of Georgia. Tasha, I was just telling them about how it seems like it's so easy to go to the police after you've been sexually assaulted or raped, go to a lawyer as if it's going to be like a smooth process and they're immediately going to get justice. And in the spirit of trying to prevent sexual violence and trying to address victim blaming, I just would like for you to enlighten us on how we can better understand that process and be a better support to each other should something despicable as sexual assault or rape happen. So sometimes the lines are really blurred, and I just want to get to a point where people understand that it's not just as easy as call 911 and everything's going to be okay, or go get a lawyer and everything's going to be okay. So please enlighten us on that process, please.
Well, it is a long process from the victim standpoint. First, you have to have an incident. There has to be an incident to occur for the criminal justice process to even begin. So, example, we have a female, she's out, she gets sexually assaulted, whether it be raped or just sexual battery, either way, she gets assaulted. So first, she's the victim 9 times out of 10 is trying to figure out, should I go to the police? And my advice to any victim, yes, you want to always report a sexual assault or crime of that matter to the police as soon as possible. So as soon as the incident has occurred, right afterwards, go to the police. And because there are a lot of things that the police officer is going to do in their investigation, like get a swab of your vagina, send you to the emergency room, take a report, take pictures. And all these things that they're doing at the beginning of your incident helps your case in the long run. So always go to the police because it's very important within those 24 hours to collect all evidence that's related to that sexual assault.
Like physical evidence.
Yes, physical evidence. And then
Okay.
also it's the memory, the incident is fresh on your brain too. So you want to get all facts out that you can at that moment while you can remember.
Right. So I was just thinking about the PTSD that comes from rape and how afterwards, like I was just watching I May Destroy You, and they were asking her all these questions when she went to the police, but she couldn't really put the details together. Like it took her at least, well, from what it seemed like, a couple weeks. So what happens in the event that they can't remember? I assume that would hurt their case if they can't remember within that first 24 hours or 48 hours.
In some instances, it doesn't look good for a victim not to remember. However, I think when you're trying to remember a traumatic experience like that, you don't remember all the details, or sometimes you get the details confused and mixed up because you had just suffered a traumatic experience. Like it's very traumatic for you. So you're trying your best to remember what he looked like, or he or she looked like, what he had on, or where you guys were. And it's hard because you're internalizing what just occurred. Someone just took a part of you without your permission. You were just violated. So it's to be expected for you not to remember every detail, but any detail helps. And that's why it's important to go report it as soon as possible, because now you have DNA sample. We can get saliva, we can get those things. So that helps in building your case when there's DNA.
Okay, so we had Brittany on here previously, and she was talking about how in DC, when she was admitted to, I guess, the rape kit area, they were taking all her DNA samples. Like she literally went through all those steps and still was not able to bring charges against her raper. So even with having a rape advocate, even with doing all the things, so if you I don't know exactly what happened with the court case, but at what point, like at that point, should you be inserting a lawyer if you go through all of those processes and the police still don't bring charges against the person? Is that when a lawyer would come in?
Well, excuse me. the police officer task, I used to be a police officer as well. So before I became a defense attorney. So the
Okay.
police officer is the first responding person that you're going to talk to. So the police officer job is to ask you all the questions. At that point in time, after asking questions, you answering, the police officer makes the decision as to whether or not they have enough probable cause to get a warrant for the alleged suspect. And at that point in time, if they do, based on the testimony from the victim, they go take out a warrant. They go to the magistrate office and take out a warrant and present all the evidence. And so that's when the process begins. And so the victim doesn't have to go out and purchase an attorney because they are automatically appointed an attorney by the state, which is the prosecution. So the prosecution is your attorney automatically because they're the ones who are prosecuting your case. And then you go and you meet with the victim advocates. You sometimes will do an interview. So all those people are helping the victim as the case goes on. What happens sometimes during the investigation, they may take DNA, they may go through the rape kit, the police officers continue to investigate, and it may be hard to actually prove all the elements of the sexual assault. And so at that point in time, it's the DA's decision to figure out, is there enough evidence to actually prosecute the alleged defendant in this case? It's not about, and I think for most victims, they want to see somebody go to trial. They want someone punished. But the DAs have to ask themselves the question, do I have enough evidence to prove the case? And if they don't, that's when the person does not go to a grand jury trial. The case doesn't go to a grand jury and the person doesn't go to trial. And so the case is ultimately dismissed.
I mean, it just really surprises me when I hear that because I mean, I understand that there's like a lot of evidence or there's a lot of evidence is needed in order for them to move forward. But what does this person do if they have just been violated? They have evidence, but it's not enough evidence. And then are they just discarded? Like, is that just it?
I don't like to use the word discarded, but it's kind of like you have to find other resources to help get you through. And those resources can look anything like family members going to a therapist to talk about it. And after after being sexually assaulted, you do have the PTSD because you think about, I was first violated by a person that I did not give permission for the sexual assault. Then I was again violated when I had to go through the whole rape kit or the questioning. And then now you're telling me after I did all of that, there's still enough evidence. And so it's difficult to say what resources the victim has, because at that point in time, once you went through the criminal justice process and the DA decides that they don't want to prosecute, there is nothing other than civil. You can try to sue them civilly, but for the most part, criminal wise, there is nothing else you can do other than try to heal. You're never going to forget it, but try to heal and learn how to deal with the assault.
And that's like a part of the victim blaming. Like, I feel like like because of what you just said, because it's so up in the air, at least the criminal part, there should be more support. But there's a lot of like judgment, like, oh, you shouldn't have been wearing this, or you shouldn't have been at this place, and you shouldn't have. But there's absolutely no accountability on the person who committed the crime. And so that's where I have the issue with people that victim blame, because even if a person does go through all the steps, even if a woman, we'll say it's a woman, is fully dressed, like that doesn't necessarily mean that they invited rape. Like, like it doesn't matter what circumstance it is, it's wrong.
Yeah. And I agree. I think in the world we live in today, the media, rap artists, R&B artists, they publicize nudity, sexual acts, being very vulgar in the way that people dress. And as a result of that, you have people in the actual community dressing that way. And even women who dress very conservative, they run the risk of being sexually assaulted too. So victim blaming is horrible. It's just horrible. But society has set up victim blaming and made it easy for people to point the finger at the victim. Well, she was out late at night past 2 o'clock. What did she expect? She was out drinking and she was very drunk when she met this person. She was being very flirtatious with this person. Look at what she had on. And so all those factors play into, one, victim blaming, and two, what evidence will go to trial. I don't think there is a way to actually stop victim blaming altogether, but I think we can work consciously to not victim blame it and just ask the right questions first and just listen to the entire story. However, the criminal justice system sometimes doesn't allow that, because I'm a public defender, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and so my job is to make sure I point out all those negative bad facts that most would consider to be victim blaming. But I have a duty to my client to give them the best defense. And morally, I have to separate it. I have two different views. I have a job and then I have my moral beliefs. So I think people have to understand that it happens, and society needs to be aware of how you make the victim feel when you victim blame.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said you have to separate your moral beliefs and your job. Like I often have issue, like some people are like that, and some people like me just get to a little bit too caught up, a little bit too emotional. So I'm really glad that you said that. Now I'm like, okay, now I understand how that could be separated. But I think it's I don't want to say it's easy to do with lawyer work, but I can see, being married to a lawyer, I'm seeing like how y'all have to separate things. So I get it. But I'm really glad you said that, because I really want us to come together more. I really want us to hold space more and be more protective of each other and be more just emotionally vigilant as well as physically vigilant. And that's a part of the prevention of sexual violence, is stepping in, not being a bystander, and holding space for somebody who's been through it, and not saying stuff like, what were you wearing? What were you doing? Did you go to the police? Like, all those things are kind of preventing you from just being present and saying, I'm sorry that happened to you, or, who is it? Like, trying to be protective and show that person support. Yeah. But even if they can't do the physical, the criminal part, you said that they have a civil option of like emotional distress,
right?
Or, okay.
So criminally, the criminal standard of the burden of proof is reasonable doubt. In order for a person to be convicted of a crime, any crime, they have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So that burden is higher. However, civilly, there is an avenue, and granted, I don't deal with a lot of civil cases. However, there are some instances civilly where you can seek some type of payment from the alleged defendant, because the burden of proof is lower than what it will be in a criminal trial. I want to say it's clear and convincing evidence, or by preponderance of the evidence. It's those two standards, but either way, it is a lower standard. So although you don't get the criminal aspect, the person's not going to prison, you may get some monetary relief, which helps with your therapy, or just anything that can, a trip that can help you get your mind off of it. Now, again, I don't do civil work, but I do believe you are able to seek a civil suit for emotional distress, because that burden is lower.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad you explained it that way, because oftentimes we're like, oh, put them in jail, put them in jail, put them in jail. But then when that doesn't work out, it seems like all hope is lost. And we even see it with the Me Too movement, where R. Kelly's in jail now, Bill Cosby's in jail now. So, but I just, that's like, these are like high profile people. So I don't, it didn't seem like, it feels like, yes, this is a win for, victims and people who have been sexually assaulted, but it doesn't feel like this is how it's going to go for everybody, because these people have interests. Like, these lawyers not coming for y'all, but they have, there's like a victory at the end of this. You get more notoriety, you get more money out of it too. So I can see why they're investing in these victims and these women. But I've also seen where I know you were saying earlier that when there's more victims, it helps the case, I guess, the criminal case.
Yes.
So I'm seeing that with the T.I. and Tiny situation where there's a lawyer speaking on their behalf, they're remaining anonymous. So it seems like when there's a group of women, like it ends up moving forward faster than it would if it was just one person, which I think is really unfortunate. But
And it is unfortunate. However, having multiple witnesses or multiple victims helps any case, because the thought process is the same people, different people can't keep saying the same story, right? I don't know all the specifics in the T.I. and Tiny case, but what I do know from my understanding that there was a non-disclosure agreements for that some of the allegations that have been that have come forward. However, you have multiple women, although they've signed a NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. You have multiple women saying the same story, same scenario. So a jury's that's going to be victory. That's going to be great for the DA, the prosecution, because they're going to think, well, how is the defense going to get over multiple witnesses? What are the defense argument for multiple witnesses? And we can file all the motions we want. Majority of the time, those witnesses' statements are going to come in because it shows a pattern that this person or this couple does this often, and you have 4 or 5 victims saying the same thing. So that's very hard to overcome as a defense attorney. But the DA, that's gold. That is great material and evidence, rather.
Okay. So I mean, I'm not like a big fan of it having to be a group, but I'm seeing how when y'all come together or when y'all share your stories, like it's a better case for justice in convicting this person that violated you all. So I just wish that, I just want the community to just have more support for people who don't have, a group of girls that they can relate to, or a group of girls that have, been violated by the same person. Like, what do you have to say? I won't say what I want to say because I've been saying it, but like, what do you say to people who victim blame or who don't hold space, or what can they do? Maybe I think a lot of the times people need practical guidance. So what do you, from your point of view, what do you think that how people can hold better emotional space for people who have been through this?
Well, let me say this first. I want to encourage anyone who has suffered a sexual assault or sexual abuse to always report it. Although it may be hard, however, reporting it is going to be a step in your process of healing. So always report. As it pertains to society and how we can help and stop victim blaming, I think it's almost like a person who's depressed, and you ask them, they tell you they're depressed, and you say, why are you depressed? If I knew why I was depressed, I wouldn't be depressed, right? And so by victim blaming and asking, well, why didn't you report it? Well, first, my body was just violated without my permission. And so I'm already feeling unclean, and I already know ahead of time they're going to blame me. So I think we need to hold off on asking the question, why? It's not about why. It's about, how can I help you? What do you need from me? How can I better support you in this process? Here's my number if you want to just go out and walk and talk about it. I think we need to be more caring and when we're dealing with victims of sexual assault.
I 100% agree with that. I couldn't have said it better. Like, it's so much just to say, how can I be supportive of you? Call me when you need me. Like, and I know people are going to be like, oh, I do that all the time. But do you do it when somebody opens up about how they've been violated? Because I think for some women, and that's what we were discussing on the episode too, is that I think a lot of women have been through this and they didn't have, nobody held space for them. So when it happens to like a daughter or a friend or something like that, they don't know how to soothe with them or be supportive because nobody was supportive of them. And now they've internalized oh, it's my fault because I was wearing, or oh, this was my fault because I went this place. and it just really doesn't help the situation. So that's why I'm really trying to get us to start talking about strategies or practical ways that we can handle this, because it seems to keep being a cycle of shame over sex.
Yes, and I also was just for most people, they just want somebody to talk to, right? So although you may be the person they're talking to, and you're trying to figure out, well, I don't know how to respond. Sometimes you don't have to respond. It's all about just being there and the feeling of knowing that I can lay my head on your shoulder, I can cry to you, and it's a safe space. I know that what I'm saying to you won't go anywhere, but you're holding me and you're allowing me to vent out those emotions. And I think that helps tremendously. It's the small things that help get victims through this process. And I've seen it as a police officer, just allowing the victim to call me to cry about it or just ask questions and just reassuring her that it's going to be okay. It's difficult now, but it's going to be okay. And that's really all they want. They just want someone to I'm not saying that's all they want. That's one of the things that they want. They want to be able to feel safe and have someone who understands what it is that they're saying and where they're coming from.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And it's really not that hard to just be compassionate, show some empathy, show some compassion. And I think, opinions, but I think that, if you've been through something, like, that should give you more empathy to be there for somebody else, especially when they're trusting you enough to open up about something that was so detrimental to how they feel about themselves now.
Right.
So I'm going to go even deeper, because it's not just about women reporting their sexual assault. So when it comes to a child being violated and they are going through, I'm just noticing how children will go through something, or somebody will go through something when they're really young, and then they grow up and have all these issues because nobody was there for them or nobody stood up for them around that time. So how can we prevent sexual violence with children or around children? Like, what are some prevention techniques? And I've been saying that they can just teach their kids to have agency over their bodies, and that nobody is supposed to touch you here and there, not the hoo-ha's and the wee-wees, but really telling them, no, this is your boobs, these are your, and just telling them about their areas of their body. And if anybody touches these areas, then you need to let me know immediately. And not like, I've just seen a lot of like not believing the kid, thinking the kid is playing with you or something like that. Like I've heard a lot of ignorant stuff, and I've seen a lot of ignorant stuff, and I'm just like, okay, well, maybe people don't know how to acknowledge when their child has gone through something. Sometimes, not everybody, but just there's some people like that. So
right. So I don't have any kids, right? But I have, like, I love my godson and my goddaughters. I love them to death. And so I would just go and say, be mindful of who you allow your children around, especially when they're young and they're not able to speak. So they can't really articulate what it is that has happened, but they can point. So I just think you have to be mindful of who is around your child. You have to have the important conversation of when someone violates you. Like, if they touch you here, that's no. That means no, and immediately come and tell me. And I think if parents support their child and asking and reassuring their child that I'm going to be there for you, I think that helps communication. But in order for us to start having communication, you first have to tell the child, a person should not touch you here. A person should, if they threaten you, no matter if they threaten you, come still tell me. So you have to start that conversation. And two, you just have to be supportive of your kids and pay attention. No knock on no parent, no victim blaming, but in the job that I've done, whether it be law enforcement and being a public defender, I see that because there is a lack thereof of childcare, or there is a lack of economic or financial means to provide adequate childcare, some families are left with having to leave my child with a stranger that I've only known for a month or so. And sometimes, in most cases, if a child is molested, it's by someone who they know. It's by a family member. And so you just have to pay attention to the signs of the people who you are around. Keep eyes on your children. I know growing up, we weren't allowed to go and spend the night at other people's homes because of the stigma or the thought that my child may be molested or raped. So just set strict guidelines for your kids, and go by those guidelines, and just pay attention to their daily actions. Mood swings, they're getting in trouble in school, their grades are dropping. Typically, these are all signs of something is going wrong, not necessarily sexual abuse, but something is going on with the child. So sit the child down and have a conversation, and don't come at them in a way where they feel like they're being attacked, but come at them in a way, I'm here to listen, and I want to know how can I help.
That is just so beautiful. I'm just like, wow. Like, I hope that parents are really open to that, because that is everything. But I'm just thinking of all the overworked parents. I'm thinking of all the parents that is just a single parent and they don't really have a lot of help. So they just have to, like you said, send them over to somebody's house that they just met, and it seems like it's all good, but you don't know what's going on in their household that's going to rub off on your kid.
Right.
And it just becomes this cycle, and like you said, the behavior problems. But what happens when it's a single mother who's just working hard and trying to do the most, and they're missing these little things, and they just think, oh, he's bad, because they're quick to, especially with Black children, they're quick to say, oh, you got a bad attitude, oh, you're like, acting out, doing the most, trying to suspend them, lock them up, and do all this extra stuff, instead of just saying, no, there's something going on with your child, like you should probably talk to them about something else. So I kind of see it like, does the law not see it as their job to, like, not even the law, but just, well, the law, it would be police, it would be parents, teachers, like, is it their responsibility to step in, or they only step in when it gets really bad?
Well, we're typically, police officers don't become aware of a situation until they're called. Now, if we're talking about school resource officers, they're around children all the time. But again, they're not going to come around unless there is an issue. And so, one, there's going to be an issue when the police officer is called. Two, you have to look at the child's background and the teacher's responsibility. A teacher will more than likely call and say, hey, little Johnny has been demonstrating aggressive behavior. He's acting very sexual. So in those times, the police officer can go and converse with the kid. However, it's about building a rapport with the child. So if I've never talked to you and you've never said anything to me, and then my teacher goes and report to you that she thinks that I may have been sexually abused, I'm not coming out and telling you, because I don't know you. So it's about paying attention and building those relationships. Once you have a foundation where a kid can trust you and feels like what I say to you is going to stay between you and I, that you're able to get more information out of a child, and they're able to open up, and then all the other information that you need will come out. But then you come in Georgia, if an allegation of sexual abuse or child molestation, a child has to testify, right? So you're then faced with another obstacle. Am I going to put my 8-year-old son or daughter on the stand to be ripped apart by a defense attorney, or to experience or have to talk about what they experienced? And so that's another issue why sometimes the criminal justice system does not support, or they don't get the answer that they want, because victims sometimes don't show up to court because they don't want to relive that situation.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. I know, that you can't give your personal opinion, but I just think that's crazy to put a child on the stand about something so sensitive and so violating. But I understand, like, the law is the law. From what I'm hearing is, people just need there needs to be some hood justice here. Like, there needs to be some, some kind of meeting in the community to get this kind of person exiled, because
Right.
they're a danger to children, they're a danger to themselves, so they don't need to be around anymore. Is that possible? Can people make their own guidelines like that in their community?
Listen, I do not support violence.
Of course not.
But I cannot tell you how to react when a loved one has experienced a traumatic experience. And if the community comes together and does so, I think they need to be aware of there will be some consequences. I don't know what type of consequences, but there possibly may be. I would not suggest people meeting together saying we're going to go and beat this person up. because you really are subjecting yourself to criminal liability and criminal charges. But I think in a situation, this is a random situation or scenario. In the event a parent comes home and actually this was on TV during COVID, a student was on Zoom with school. Her cousin, I want to believe, came in while she was on Zoom and began to ask for oral from the cousin, and it was all on Zoom. So, and if any event a parent would have came home in that event, I think they would have had an affirmative defense, because I'm snapping if it's my child, right?
Right.
I'm seeing you sexually assault my child and abuse my child, so my mindset is not going to be there. So in situations like that, that is different versus your child reports to you on Monday they've been sexually assaulted, and then Thursday you go and commit a crime against the alleged defendant. You've had some cooling off time in between that. So we just have to be mindful of what it is we're doing. And I don't promote violence.
Of course not. No violence. We're not saying go and hit nobody.
Go to the police. Go to the police. But you just, I mean, different scenarios warrant different outcomes and consequences. And we just never know if we're going to be placed in that situation, and what we will actually do if we were placed in that situation.
And that's, I remember that story about that girl, and I was just like, wow, like her mom is probably gonna go off on this dude when she comes home. But wasn't that her cousin? So that makes it all.
It was either her cousin, it was someone who's related to her, and that's why I say majority of sexual with kids, majority of child molestation is what I've seen in my experience. It's someone who's related to you. It's personal. Because they have easy access. It's easier. I'm more inclined to let my son stay with his cousin than I am with the neighbor next door, because this is my blood. So my blood would not do anything to harm my child, where really they will.
They will. And it's interesting you bring that up, because R. Kelly, I believe the reason why he turned out to be such a deviant is because his mother, first of all, him and his brothers were getting molested and raped by their family members while the mom was at work. And then they first got molested. He first got molested by some guy down the street, right. And his mom was paid off for like $5,000. So because nobody was helping him, his family members were still molesting him, then he just went into life thinking that he could do what he want, along with this talent that he had. That's why he was continued that lifestyle. So it's just, I know it's hard, but your kids should be, around somebody who you can tell what kind of morals they have, how they conduct themselves in relationships. I mean, I get that it's hard, but it's still like, you still have to be vigilant about that, even if it is a relative, because a lot of the times I guess I don't quote me on this, but most of the time it's a relative, like you're saying. And I'm thinking, like, how does that go? Like, how does that process go if you find out it's a relative? Can you still go through the whole criminal process and everything?
Yes, you still go through the whole process. And I can just share a case where it wasn't my case. I was just happened to be in the courtroom. But it was a dad. A dad had sexually assaulted, child molestation of his daughter. I'm not gonna go into details, but it was traumatic. And one thing I can appreciate, the judge in this case, he walked him through, made sure he put on record what he did to that child, so there can be no if and buts about what you did to your daughter. And sitting there in the courtroom, I was in disbelief, because although I had dealt with cases as a police officer dealing with child molestation or sexually assaults, it was different being in the courtroom and hearing a father admit to child molestation of your daughter, and I just couldn't believe it. So it's kind of hard to prevent your child being sexually assaulted or molested, because you just don't know. But I think setting parameters around who your child goes around, male or female, whether a child sits in a male's lap, don't do that. Posting certain pictures on social media that may reveal certain things, because we all like social media. We live in an age where social media is important. So when you post pictures, you're just looking at it like, this is a cute picture of my son or daughter, but predators are looking at different aspects and different angles. So it's hard to say concretely what to watch out for or what to do. We can only say just continue to be vigilant and pay attention. Pay attention to your children and their body. If you have to inspect them at night when you're giving them a bath, do that inspection.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I really do think that people struggle with like that conversation because their parents didn't have it with them, or they're like holding on to things from their past. So they feel like, oh, I'm gonna just, say these little things and let the world teach my child about sex and about, the potential dangers of other people's intentions. So I really think it's important that they know that it's going to take a little bit more than just, oh, I'm going to just drop you off at a family member's house, or I'm going to just send you to whoever friend house and not check out, how these people are living, what kind of morals they have, how they protect their own children. Like all of that is necessary. So I commend all the moms who've been doing that. I commend all the parents who do this, but I just did not want it to be a continued cycle of people being awkward or weird about sex, or making it out to be this like super taboo conversation, to where the children now have there's access to everything.
Right. Cartoons nowadays have some sexual explicit language and metaphors. So it's kind of like we're living in a world where we can't escape the conversation of sex. Children are being exposed to sexual conversations before we were. So we just have to talk about it. At age 5, when they're able to put together a whole sentence, the conversation needs to start. It may need to start a little sooner, but you need to make sure your son and daughter are aware of where a person should not touch them at. And if they do, make sure they know they can come and tell you, and you're going to protect them. That is really my advice. I just appreciate my parents for, at the time I didn't, but now I do, not allowing me to go spend the night at other people's homes and telling me don't be around that man, or don't sit in that man's lap, don't bend over that way. It's the small things that my parents said to me when I was growing up that I still hear. Even when I'm, as a grown person, I'm very cognizant of what it is that I'm doing when I'm around a man, so that they don't get that impression that I'm trying to be sexual, or I'm flirting, or I made them feel a certain way. And it's crazy that we have to think that way, and we just can't walk out and just live life.
Yes, and it's really unfortunate, but I hear men trying to say that. Like the way you said it is just very nice. Like you have to be not nice, but it's very to the point, but it's also with some compassion. I think the way that men explain it is like, oh, don't wear this, don't go there, don't do this, but it doesn't seem like there's any type of accountability on, we'll say men. It's not just men, because it's women too that are taking advantage of young boys, and that's a whole other thing, is sexual assault from grown women who have sex with young men, trying to take, I guess, their manhood. I don't know. That whole process, I've said it before, like I don't get how men view that, because it seems like it's like a rite of passage or something, but really to me it's a grown woman molesting you.
It's a double standard. Society has made it a double standard that is more favorable to women, because men see it as, oh, he's just out here getting some, as they would say. Where mothers are seeing it as, no, you took advantage of my son. That's
right. So yeah, and that's wrong, and I just don't get it. But that's why I don't address it. I wait till I get a man on here and they get mansplained it to me, because I just cannot deal with no, that's not okay for a grown woman to have sex with a young child. But okay, whatever. But as far as just teaching your boys self-control, teaching them that women are not objects, they do not belong to you, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this is my final question.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if they're drunk. And I've been going through this T.I. and Tiny thing, and a lot of people are like, oh, they knew what she was doing. Oh, they took the drugs. It sounds like a lot of them had a drink, and then they took the drink and then blacked out. and then woke up and didn't know what was happening. So how does that go as well in the law process? Because I also saw that, and I may destroy you. She was doing drugs all night. She was drinking all night, and then she was sexually assaulted. So I see that it's something that does not excuse rape. Like they say, like just because somebody is um taking drugs or blacked out, that's not an invitation for rape. But how does the law look at that?
Well, in a situation with rape, you have to prove that the person didn't consent to the sexual act. So hypothetically, if we're using a TI situation where they have signed a non-disclosure to participate in a sexual act, but they did not sign a non-disclosure to accept the drug, if a drug was given. I'm not saying they gave a drug, I'm just saying if a drug was given, they didn't sign that agreement to take the drug and to have sex. And so the biggest thing that the the defense will have to get over is whether or not she consented. And if she was drugged, she cannot consent. If she was drugged and she was out of and she blacked out, it's hard for her to say yes. Now she can't say no because she's blacked out, so that's evident. But the question will fall on: did the victim consent to the sexual act when she was drugged? And so that's going to be the argument that the DA is going to argue. Basically, she couldn't consent because she was drunk. Although all this led up to it, she had a non-disclosure, she agreed to hang out with them, but it still comes down to her not saying yes, perform this sexual act.
Right. The consent means a conscious yes. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm drunk, oh, I'm on drugs, and it's a yes, and you're being predatory. You just get your way. And I feel a lot of people say, oh, you're drunk, oh, you were taking this and taking that, but that doesn't mean somebody can violate you. That doesn't mean somebody can rape you just because you're drunk, just because you're on drugs. And especially when you're taking the drug, or if it was something you had no idea. I just think, how do you, aside from having multiple people say it, how do you prove that you were drugged?
Well, sometimes, majority of the time, they take your blood levels. It's almost like a DUI. They can take your blood and submit it to the crime lab, and the crime lab can determine what type of drugs, if any, you have in your system. So the argument can be made as to the levels. If a person has a higher amount of drugs in their system, then the state will argue they couldn't have been aware, they couldn't have been conscious, and could not have consented to the sexual act. Versus if it was a lower amount, the defense is going to say she was fine. She was able to consent, although being drugged. So it just depends on the facts of the case as to what the state, the DA will argue, and what the public defender or the criminal attorney will argue. But it all boils down to, it seems like in the TI case, is whether or not those individuals actually consented to the sexual act, or consented to taking a drug and knew the drug was in the drink that was provided to them. That's what it seems like to me on the brief facts that we all know about what's going on.
Well, they have representation now, and he is not playing. So we're going to see how this all plays out. But I definitely hope those girls get justice. I think it's absolutely disgusting that they would be taken advantage of. Even if you do sign up for sex, you don't sign up to be raped. Like, that is completely bogus that people think that somebody would sign up and then, oh, what's going to happen. No, they don't. They signed up for a good time and ended up at the hospital. Like, that's not.
And that's just to add, not to cut you off, it's almost like prostitution. They feel like a lot of cops don't take prostitutes serious because they're actually out here making a living off of prostitution. And then, although they may have been paid for a job, but the job became more aggressive, or they said no and told the person to get off of them. But because they're a known prostitute, sometimes their case doesn't go forward. And so we just all need to do better. And although I'm a criminal defense attorney, I will be the first to say I'm going to try my best to show the victim in a negative light. However, I do separate the two because I was a police officer, and I do empathize with those who experienced sexual assault. And I think you have to change your mindset about how you treat and how you talk to sexually abused victims.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that. I really appreciate all your insight because you really broke everything down the way that it needed to be broken down, because people really don't understand, like, this is a very sensitive thing. It's the law is not always on your side, so you have to go out your way to prevent it. And although we want people to be better, not everybody has high moral standards. Not everybody operates on a respect code. So I mean, this is just what we have to do. But I'm glad that we are opening up and having these conversations both ways so we know what to expect. So thank you so much, Tasha, for being here with me. I am so grateful that you were able to schedule me in. I know you're busy. So I just want to leave you with so much love and light and positivity your way. I know there's a lot going on in Georgia right now. It's a lot going on. So I just pray for protection and peace your way. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for thinking about me to have this conversation with me, and I am very grateful for the opportunity. But for all those who will be listening, I'm also the founder of Talks with Tasha, which is a foster home or nonprofit where I give back to foster kids because I was a foster child, and also is geared about real life experiences dealing with criminal justice procedures and my own expertise in what I've experienced. So if you have a time, go check out my Instagram page at attorney Tasha Heflin, or check out my YouTube page at Talks with Tasha Inc. To get more updates about what it is I'm doing in the community and what it is I'm doing in the criminal justice process.
We love it because representation matters, and we need to see us everywhere, especially in Georgia. And I'm gonna keep saying that about Georgia because Georgia needs prayer right now. But thank you so much, Tasha. I really appreciate you. I'm gonna keep saying that. I can't wait till our Meg gets back. I'm gonna tell him how amazing this was and how filled I feel. I'm just so happy that people are getting all this great information. Definitely check out her nonprofit and her page. I'm gonna link all that so they'll have information.